Welcome to Climate Quickies, bite-sized nuggets of climate goodness from our TEDx London experts in under 5 minutes.
In this week's Climate Quickie, we hear from neuroscientist Dr. Chris DeMare, an expert in polarization and the psychology of climate change. Chris shares why our brains aren't optimized to process climate change, but if we engage with it a lot, it starts to feel a lot more personal and therefore easier to manage in our minds. If you enjoy this quickie, make sure to listen to Chris's full episode from season 1, where there's much more to climate action than reducing your carbon footprint. Let's head over to Chris now to hear more. And remember, stay curious.
So why are we hardwired to ignore climate change? What's the psychology and the neuroscience behind it? Well, the good news is that actually we aren't really hardwired to ignore it, but there is a couple of things that make it really difficult for people to engage with climate change. So the things that our brains really are optimized for is other people, understanding other people, trying to make sense of them and interacting with them, gossiping about them, telling stories about them, learning from them, all of the things that make us a social species, that make us interact with other people. That's what our brains are really, really good at. So what our brains are not really good at is understanding big issues that are taking place at a planetary scale and over long periods of time. That's like trying to get into our brains through a little side gate in the wall rather than that big gate at the front of our minds. Now, the good news is that our brains are also very flexible, and that specifically for young people who are going through a critical stage of development in their lives, where their brains are trying to make sense of the world, that climate change and the threats it poses to the planet can actually start to feel really, really personal. And that can really start to tap into those person-dealing components or parts of our brain. And that's why there is a bit of a generational divide here possible, where people who come to climate change later in life might find it much harder to engage with it on that more personal level. Whereas for young people who might not have heard anything else than climate change since the time they were born, for them, it might start to feel really, really personal. And those threats to the planet and to biodiversity and everything might start to feel as if they are threats to a person. And so, in summary, our brains aren't hardwired to ignore climate change. They're not optimized to engage with climate change, but specifically, if we are exposed to it a lot, it does start to feel much more personal in a way that we are engaging with it on a much more personal level. So what is it that you can do if you're starting to feel eco-anxiety, or if you're so turned off by the negative messages around climate change that you find it really difficult to engage with it? The main thing to notice is that, yes, climate change is a big problem that we have to deal with at the moment, but we can reframe it in our own heads as trying to work towards a better world, where the world will be better, more just, more fair, more equal for everyone, and we will be in a better situation if we are getting through this bottleneck of climate change. So try to reframe in your heads climate change from being a life-threatening issue or a planet-threatening issue to something that if we do resolve it, we will end up with a much better society. So rather than thinking about climate change as this negative thing, this black cloud that is hanging over our heads, if you manage to find a way, if you find a way to reframe it in your own mind as a problem we need to solve to get to a better world, then that might be the thing that gives you the possibility to engage with it in a much more positive mindset. And it might be the thing that helps you to get over the anxiety that you are feeling about that dark cloud that is hanging over our heads. To then practically make that happen, find communities of people who are like-minded to yourself and start doing things with them that get us to that better world. It's really flabbergasting to me that in 2022, we are still living with solutions to problems as if we're in the 20th century. But if you look at the difference between the 19th century and the 20th century, we made an enormous progress, enormous leap forwards. We can do the same again in the 21st century. We can leave oil and gas and coal behind in a way that we left steam engines behind in the 19th century. If we crack this problem of climate change and we move to a cleaner energy system and a cleaner production of food and other essential goods, we'll all be better off.
Thanks for listening to this Quickie.
This episode was created by our superstar podcast team at TEDx London and supported by our headline partner, the global bank, Citi. Until next time,
stay curious.